Howdy folks, it is Monday, June 18th, 2012. I'm Skip Ruddertail, your Otter editor, and welcome to another episode of the Bad Dog Book Club. On a personal note, I want to apologize to you folks that you haven't had a new episode in the last couple weeks. I don't have any good excuses other than the new job got caught up with me a little bit, but got a plan, gonna stay on schedule the rest of the summer till it's time for Rocky Mountain FurCon anyway, and hope you enjoy the episode. Toonces and I will be back to discuss it next week. This episode, we got a little, want to give a little shout out to our friend Pyrostinger, who wrote a story for us, and we'll discuss that in the next episode too. But we promised that we were going to read his story, Mouse Porn, partially because it was a straight story. But when we asked our good friend Alex, who, as you may have noted, is not exactly straight, he chose another story. So, Pyrostinger, we wanted to read this story. It appealed to both of us, partially as a challenge. So here's another, here's another little straight story. Oh my God, what's happening to the book club? But anyway, we hope you enjoy Mouse Porn. Pyrostinger, thank you again. And you're in trouble, because I'm going to be reading it this week. Mouse Porn by Pyrostinger. In a low, sudden hum, the vibrator sprang to life in Emma's paws. The brown mouse lay on her bed, slowly turning over the featureless phallus, trying to remember when the last time she had a real one between her legs. The memory came all too soon, and it wasn't pleasant, so she amended her thought to a real one that gave me an orgasm. That category was empty enough, and so she was sadly content. That line of thinking couldn't have been productive, so Emma instead closed her eyes and turned the vibe off and dropped it into the bed beside her. The dog that had been so recently here hadn't even given her that slight fight or flight feeling. He was just that goofy. He was nice and all, but trying and failing to juggle eggs wasn't entertaining so much as annoying, especially when he suddenly had to go, leaving Emma to clean it up herself. She was pretty sure Dean didn't actually have a sister, never mind one that suddenly needed him for some reason or other. Sighing, she tried to put yet another failed date out of her mind and made a mental note to avoid Dean at work. What was wrong with her? She was a nice girl, right? She wasn't mean to anybody. She even lived up to her species stereotype of silence, a lot of times not talking when it wasn't absolutely necessary. She wasn't a bitch like Diana, whom Emma could swear was out to get her, and even she had found a guy she could stay with. So how come she couldn't find a decent guy? And for that matter, why was she torturing herself with these questions and memories? With a squeak of frustration, she grabbed her vibrator, turned it on, and used it as a massage tool on her neck and shoulders. When she finally relaxed, she started to feel an erotic thrill of simply holding a vibrator, causing her body to heat up and her face to flush. One deep sigh later, the vibrator began to move south, staying on her brown furred body, lower, over her modest breasts, between, even further down. A mental picture formed. Mostly formless, vaguely rodent-like, the faceless male picked up where the vibrator left off, trailing his way across her body with one paw, letting it fall any which way, so long as that way was south. Suddenly the male bent down, kissing her lower lips, drawing a gasp from Emma with her eyes wide shut. Sometime later, Emma lay on her bed, the vibrator off, sticky, and in the vicinity of her legs. Yet another date that ended in self-fulfillment. Joy. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, she got up, then went to the bathroom to shower. With the water streaming around her, her mind again wandered back to why she was currently alone, and some of her bad judgments. One such male, a squirrel, had a serious case of halitosis. His breath was a combination of curdled milk, rotten eggs, and raw decay, a trio of scents the mouse had never hoped to smell again, individually, never mind altogether. Emma had to subdue a gag reflex every time he was close. Combine that with him being the kind of guy that didn't know the meaning of personal space and seeming oblivious when the mouse started choking down breath mints. It had been an ugly night. Emma tried to figure out how exactly she was attracted to such guys as she finished toweling herself dry and slipped into a bathrobe. It was a moment of annoying yet blissfully consuming search for some clean panties later that she left her room, clad in that and an open bathrobe. Passing by the other bedroom, she went to knock on his door before she stopped. There were voices, one moaning in bliss, the other grunting. Emma rolled her eyes, then knocked on the door. "You want some tea?" she called out to Vince. Yeah, just a sec," the rat said. Emma thought she could hear some kind of fluid, but she left it be and went to the kitchen. Vince came out a second later, looking slightly flushed in his white fur and wiping his paws on his pajama pants, but otherwise unfazed. "What kind of tea do you want, Vince?" Emma called, digging into the cupboard for the bags. "Whatever you're having. I don't care what kind." Vince was a sweetie, and really, Emma was perhaps a little sad that he was gay. He was definitely attractive, and probably a decent lay, too, judging by the real moans she heard from his room. She was pretty sure it took some skill to get a guy to sound off like that, or maybe it was where he picked them up from. Vince went clubbing at least weekly, and he never came home alone. When the tea was ready, Emma poured a couple of mugs and brought one to the rat on the couch, who had the TV on and sat down next to him. Briefly, her thoughts drifted back to the mystery mail of her fantasies before being interrupted by a certain scent. "Almost every time I'm near your room, I hear you with porn on," she said, wrinkling her nose. "I mean, geez, how many times do you paw a day?" "Some days, more than others. And don't act like you don't. What was that just now, He shot back at her, drawing a blush that was thankfully hidden beneath Emma's darker fur. Mostly. "How... You can get pretty loud when you're really into it," he went on, grinning. It took a moment for Emma to get over her embarrassment enough to muster a comeback. "Well, so, you're the one that's got all the porn." "So," he said carelessly, picking up his mug with a nod of thanks. The mouse finally felt her blush start to recede as they continued down this tack. "But why? It's not like you don't get laid enough. Didn't you come home with at least 2 guys this week?" "1 and a half, but The rat shrugged, most of his attention on the TV. "It's a lot of work to get somebody in bed. With porn, all you gotta do is watch it and paw. You're good." 1 and a half? Vince smirked, not taking his eyes off the TV. I went to his place. Emma giggled. "So it's not that you're lacking for sex, it's just that you're a horny bastard, huh?" "Something like that," he told her, leaning back against the couch. He finally looked over at her, his eyes flicking downward. "What happened to your dog boy? He didn't get you wet enough?" An advantage Emma saw of rooming with a guy like Vince was that she could talk about her love life freely and not have to worry he was going to pull any moves on her, which was good since Emma had started walking around the apartment in her bathrobe and panties a little after she moved in with Vince. This was mostly to test that he wasn't actually interested in her, and she got used to it. Shaking her head and grimacing, she fanned herself with the open robe. "He didn't even get me into the bedroom. Didn't you hear me cleaning up the mess he made in the kitchen?" She sighed, then looked over at Vince. "I don't know how I keep dating guys that suck in some way. No offense." The rat grinned. "None taken. At least this one didn't start bawling on you." Emma cringed. "Ugh, don't remind me. When I heard him burst into tears from my room, I thought he'd hurt you or something," Vince said, laughing. "Then I find out it's the fox who's crying like a baby. Come on, Emma, where do you find these guys?" "Oh, shut up, okay?" Vince's mirth was a little infectious, causing her to smile for a moment before she controlled herself. "I don't know," the mouse went on, taking another sip of her tea. "Everywhere, almost. Crybaby I met at the gym. Not the one downstairs, but the one up the street. That one. That one just now. Ugh, he's a coworker. They seem nice enough, but it's just at some point, without fail, things just seem to fall apart. I guess I'm lucky that not every time it happens in the bedroom." Emma looked up from the TV and at Vince, changing the subject. "So what kind of porn you like?" "Ones with guys in it?" He shot back, grinning. Emma giggled. "Oh, come on. What kind of answer is that? Seriously, what kind of porn do you like? I mean, do you have a preference in species or what?" The mouse pulled her legs up to her chest, her arms closing around them. Vince got up and went around the couch to the kitchen. "I'm going to make some popcorn. You want any?" he asked her. Emma pouted. "Oh, come on, Vince. Don't change the subject like that." "What? I'm a male of the baser urges," he replied, flicking on the light. He started to shuffle around in the cabinet. "You want kettle corn, or what is this? Kettle corn or extra butter?" "I want to say kettle corn, but the extra butter stuff has been laying around for a while." "Extra butter it is," he said dynamically, pulling a bag from the cabinet and unwrapping it. Emma turned around and leaned over the back of the couch, her robe still open as she watched Vince prepare the popcorn, her tail swaying gently behind her. So, what baser urges are these anyway? Eat, sleep, fuck, the rat said, giving a bit of a toothy grin to her as he shut the door of the microwave, setting the time. The mouse rolled her eyes. Vince snickered, leaning against the countertop. Again, Emma was a little saddened that Vince was gay. Yeah, he had a tiny bit of femininity to him. She trusted his sense of fashion whenever they went shopping, which was fairly often. But otherwise, he was all male. Physically, he was pretty much a contrast to Emma. He was stocky, where she was thin and lithe, streamlined his appearance in the gym. He had white fur, where hers was brown. He was taller than Emma's 5'5", framed by a head, though most usually were. He was also nice. He was funny. Hell, he was even a rodent. Emma always seemed to get along better with fellow rodents. You never did answer my question, Vince, she told him. The rat's eyes flickered down towards the mouse. About the kind of porn you like. The rat pursed his lips. You know. Yes, said Emma eagerly. I think I know why you keep bringing home guys that suck. Vince, the mouse whined. There was a sound of popping corn from the microwave. Emma sighed and dropped her head on the back of the couch. She looked back up at him after a moment. Stop doing that, she complained. Stop doing what? He returned, his face all innocence. She glared daggers at him. You're lucky I don't have anything I want to throw at you, she spat. He shrugged, then blithely continued on. I think it's because you feel pity for these guys rather than actual attraction. Emma scowled less and listening now. I mean, how many guys in the last, say, month have you brought home that you pitied instead of actually liked? Pop, pop, pop. Emma blinked. There was egg juggler tonight, fish lips last week, pushover a couple weeks before that. All of them, right? Vince said, smirking. The mouse nodded slowly. Kinda seems to me like if the guy is some kind of cute pratfall, all of a sudden he's cute enough for you to drag home and try to lay. And then, horror of horrors, he's bad at it, and there ain't enough redeeming factors to teach him. The mouse frowned again. Well, it's not that. The microwave beeped, announcing that time was up while the bag popped a few more times. Vince pulled out the bag and got out a large bowl, pouring the popcorn into it. His words hung in the air for a while as Emma puzzled out what he meant. I swear, the rat went on, some of these guys are so pathetic. I think you're just bringing them home for me to make fun of them after you kick them out. I swear, the rat went on, some of these guys are so pathetic. I think you're just bringing them home for me to make fun of after you kick them out. He threw a couple of pieces of popcorn into his mouth, one dropping to the floor. Muttering a small curse, Vince threw it out, plopping himself down on the couch. It was here that something enormous occurred to Emma. What if he was right? What if she was sabotaging her dates just so she could talk to Vince about her failing love life? What if, during the course of their living together, Emma had developed a crush on Vince? Anyway, Vince said through a mouthful of popcorn, setting down the bowl on the coffee table. He took a moment to chew and swallow. You wanted to know what porn I prefer, right? It took Emma a little while to react, but once she realized what he said, she seized on it. What? Oh yeah, sure. Wait a second. Yes, of course I do. Out with it already. She'd think about her love life, suicide later. Vince leaned forward, grinning softly. Thinking back, the mouse might remember that he seemed to have a little bit of a nervous air to his grin. I'll do you one better. I'll show you. She thought about this for a moment. She'd been raised in a household where her parents had absolutely forbidden any form of pornography or indecency, up to and including dildos. After happening upon her mother, she made it a point to have a small collection. Emma grinned. Bring it on, Vince, she told him. You got it, he replied, and went off towards his room. Another odd thing that she noticed more immediately was that Vince's normally lifeless tail was twitching at its tip. Emma shrugged it off, smiling eagerly as the rat came back holding a CD case. Downloaded it off the net and burned it on a DVD because the previews before porn kinda suck. Well, hurry up and put it in already, Emma squealed in her excitement, tugging the popcorn bowl to her, then giggling as her unintentional pun. Shifting to throw her legs under her in a sort of side saddle, she threw a couple pieces in her mouth and chomped down on them with relish. Vince chuckled at the joke, but softly, somewhat nervously, and most definitely not seizing on it like the rat normally would have. Emma frowned, wondering what was so significant about the porn that Vince kept quiet about. Vince, you all right? Yeah, he said quickly, a menu popping up on the screen. He adjusted the volume with one remote, then pressed play with the other, sitting down beside Emma. Just fine. Now that she had acquired an eye for it, the mouse noticed that Vince was sitting differently. Gone was the way he sort of threw himself into the seat. Now he was sitting in a guarded, almost nervous way. His tail tip kept twitching. What was going on here? Vince, is there something about this porn that I should know about? Emma asked cautiously, flicking her eyes from the rat to the screen. The TV went from black to a title screen with white block letters. Sewer Dreams. Vince laid his tail across his waist, one paw on the unruly tip. I think that everything will be clear once you see it. Vince laid his tail across his waist, one paw on the unruly tip. I think that everything will be clear once you see it. The mouse blinked. When the hell did Vince start pronouncing G's at the end of words? She was about to say something and then decided against it. The mouse was on screen. Naked, but staring out at the world from the inside of a grate, watching various other furs walk by. There isn't any bondage or anything weird like... No, the rat spoke up promptly. No bondage or anything like that, no. I'm not really that kind of guy. Vince was really starting to unnerve Emma, what with his suddenly proper way of speaking and his inability to notice she was hogging the popcorn. His eyes were intently on the screen as a rat, male, came up behind the mouse and hugged him. The two starting a conversation. She wasn't paying attention to the dialogue, she just saw the rat start to fondle the mouse, which lapsed into a blowjob and then some eventual male-on-male sex. Emma had to admit that it was mildly arousing. What occupied most of her attention was Vince, who she stared at out of her peripheral vision. He was looking at her. You're creeping me out a little, Vince. Oh, sorry, he averted his eyes. For a moment, anyway. This was about when the female mouse appeared on screen. Okay, Emma thought, getting back into the story. This femme must be here to move things along. A little odd that gay porn had a girl in it, but whatever. And then the gray-furred female started to make out with the male mouse from before. You know, the same one she'd just seen take a rat cock up his tail hole. Still, Emma shrugged this off mentally. Again, must be for story purposes. Then clothes started coming off. The pillow-biting mouse was fondling the female's breasts. What shocked Emma wasn't so much that the porn was a bisexual one, but more that Vince, who was gathering more of her peripheral attention, had his paw in his pants and a slight worried frown on his face. His eyes lingered on her, but flitted to the screen every now and again. The two on screen got it on without interruption. I could only really paw to this particular one, Vince spoke up after a while. And only recently, really. It's just, I like mice, he finished lamely. He looked at her this time with a semi-apologetic expression on his face, his eyes telling a somewhat different story. Is this going where I think it's going to go? Emma thought frantically, her heart starting to flutter. She wasn't looking directly at him. Well, her face wasn't anyway. Her eyes certainly were. Now I know what you're thinking, the rat went on, his paw stubbornly in his pants. No, you don't, countered Emma in her head. Why is a gay rat watching bisexual porn, right? Okay, maybe he knows something of what I'm thinking, Emma thought. It's just that, after living with you for a while... Oh, shit. I've begun to realize, well... Vince began to fiddle with his tail tip with both paws. This is starting to sound like a confession. Oh, shit. Let me put it this way. When you moved in with me, I thought you were pretty. After living with you for a while, I come to see that you're beautiful. Clearing his throat, the rat turned to look at Emma, a hopeful expression on his face, despite Emma's fallen jaw. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh god, oh shit. On the screen, the rat and the female mouse had met up for some reason, and they were starting to have sex. On the couch, Emma's mouth still hung open. Somewhere her mind screamed at her to do something. She lifted some popcorn to her mouth and ate it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Began Vince, and then fell silent again. The only noises to be heard were the moans and groans from the TV and the soft munching from the mouse's mouth. Do something! Anything! All right, well, it's clear that you don't like this movie, the rat started, clapping his paws on his thighs before standing. So I'm gonna... Vince! Emma squeaked, when the rat stood, his erection stood out in stark relief against his pants. Wait a sec, what the hell kind of reaction is that? Why am I acting like Mom? The thought came to her mind unbidden. Vince was confused until he looked down. Oh, sorry, he said, clearing his throat. In the lighting, it was hard to see his face, but she was sure he was blushing real hard right now. I never, and well, we're watching porn, so just sit down, okay? She went on, but not unkindly. He sat down, still confused. Again, his eyes flicked between the TV and Mouse, but lingered on Mouse while Emma thought. You know, Emma's libido reasoned, Vince is pretty hot, and he likes you, so... There was a mental shrug. Besides, Mom definitely wouldn't have watched the porn, so she wouldn't have gotten this far now, would she? Emma started to scoot over. Noticing this, Vince wasn't sure what to do. He watched as the mouse got herself closer, then put a paw on his thigh. He said other words, utterly failing him. The paw started to stroke, and the rat found the mouse kneeling on the couch, leaning forward. You like me, right? She asked. That's what this whole thing is about, right? Well, yeah, he replied, then hastily tacked on. But if this makes you uncomfortable or anything, you can just forget all about Vince? Yeah, Emma? Shut up. Emma's libido said through her mouth and also pushed her forward. The rat sputtered for a second it took for the mouse to cross the distance between them and then finally shut up when she kissed him full on the mouth. Vince is a pretty good kisser, one part of Emma reflected. What the hell am I doing? Another bit of her cried out. That part was quickly silenced, despite its many protests about how gay her roommate was, if she hadn't noticed, and that this was wrong somehow. Most of her was getting into the moment, pushing herself against Vince, her robe inching open. The mouse ended up with her body against Vince's, feeling the rat's warmth suffuse through her as the kiss slowly came to a close. There was a moment of awkward and embarrassed silence while the two stared at each other, many thoughts running through their minds. Chief among were, oh my god, I can't believe we just did that. Emma was intensely aware of the throbbing shaft poking into her. Oh yeah, you like my cock up your man pussy? Said a voice from the TV that nobody was watching. Tastes like popcorn, Vince managed in a husky whisper. Oh, I just had some, the mouse replied. I know, said the rat as he kissed her again. And after another, somewhat slower kiss, they surfaced again, breathing hard at each other. Just want you to know that I'm out of practice with femmes, he warned. I'll teach you, gasped the mouse, placing her paws on either side of his face and yanking him into a kiss. She let out a small squeak as she felt Vince's paws slide over and grab her rump, then pulled out at the kiss long enough to say, I don't think you have too much to learn. The grab would be a little much under ordinary circumstances, but Emma's libido was riding too high. During that last kiss, Emma had shifted herself slightly higher on Vince's body, so when it ended, her breasts were about level with his face. She clutched his head, tugging him to her, and ended up with the cautiously licked area between her breasts. Letting out a squeak that could have been mistaken for a short, high-pitched growl, the mouse pulled the rat's head back to glare at him. Vince, however, was fairly quick. Ain't I supposed to? Yes! Okay, he said. Before she could pull him in again, he braced a paw against her shoulder and slurped over her nipple. It was sloppy, but it was enough to draw a moan from the suddenly heated Emma, who finally got the message to stop cramming him into her body. Vince slurped again, lapping over her furry tit, then bit into the nipple, drawing a squeak. Too hard, Emma told him. Sorry. The bite was replaced by the tongue, which pressed against her, rolling her nipple around a bit. When teeth came into play again, it was a much softer nibble. He learned fast. A little too fast. He was striking at spots Emma didn't know she had, spots that were never ever touched before. He also learned that a paw was as good as a mouth in a pinch, only less messy. He grabbed and groped the breast he had left, the other being pulled into his mouth and sucked on, encouraged on by the mouse's steady groans and soft squeaks. His free paw roaming down below, the rat encountered her panties and decided to circumvent them, fingers slipping under the sopping fabric to touch lightly at her bare sex. Emma approved. Emma approved more and louder when Vince decided to tug at one breast with his teeth, lightly of course, roll a nipple between his thumb and forefinger, and pump her with 2 fingers. She approved so much, her entire body got into the approval process, clutching his ears and grinding her hips against his fingers. Although the rat was relatively new to females, there were still certain things that Vince had to know were universal. For example, the heated gaze that Emma threw him clearly stated, in no uncertain terms, "Fuck me or finish me." She had no idea what it was about the whole situation, but it had turned her on so much that she could have sworn she had sprung a leak. For the same reason, she was also losing interest in the whole why bit as well. Vince chose the former. This meant that he was chittered at angrily for the brief moment that there was nothing inside the mouse's body, dimly aware of her panties being shifted to the side, only to have his decision greeted with silence that spoke volumes of her delight. As the rat's heated shaft slipped through her depths, Emma briefly wondered if he was a bottom or a top. That thought was quickly beaten up by this one. So long as he can fuck, does it matter? The tiny part of Emma's brain that wasn't completely consumed by pleasure as Vince began to pound away at her considered this. Then it saw that the party all the other areas of her mind were at. It saw that it seemed fun. Then it shrugged and took the rest of the night off to join in. It was either that or brave the libido's bullying, which was already jumped various other parts of Emma's mind in order for them to just shut up already. Physically, Emma wasn't doing much. The mouse was mostly holding on as tightly as she could, her mouth hanging slightly open in a way that wasn't 100% sexy, but nothing coming out of it. Vince began to slow down, upon which Emma immediately looked at him. Her gaze said this: "You better have a damn good reason for stopping right now, because if you don't, I'm gonna castrate you." Or begin to say to, anyway. She got about as far as "you'd better," while Vince relocated his paws on her rear end. The rest of the threat was lost as he squeezed, dragging another moan from her. Her mind finally shut down as the rat resumed his quick and hard thrusts and went back to the party, Emma's libido standing in the corner and cracking its knuckles ominously to make sure all the other parts got the message. The rat began to nibble harder at Emma's nipple, but this time the mouse was too far gone to care, the pain she felt enhancing the roil of pleasure starting to bubble over her body. The mouse's arms began to wrap around Vince's head harder, her body grinding into his every stroke with as much ferocity as a mouse can muster, which is quite a lot. She could also feel Vince's hardened prick throbbing deep inside her, vaguely able to tell that she was close as well, perhaps closer. With a small, quiet squeak, Emma went over, bursting as her pussy began to contract hard around Vince's rat hood. For his part, and probably due to his earlier exercises, the rat managed a few more thrusts into the mouse's tightening channel before letting loose his own squeak, spurts of warm seed flowing up into her body. The air was filled with pants and the heavy scent of a good romp. Emma's body finally relaxed, her mouth open to take in as much air as possible while she recovered. Vince appeared to be similarly spent, his breaths brushing past her ear. The porn had long since stopped and returned to the menu screen without anybody noticing or caring. The break allowed them to concentrate on their individual thoughts. Emma's anxieties struck at her with a vengeance, though surprisingly her mind accepted Vince's advances. Her thoughts were primarily sorted with how their relationship had changed, for a moment, before the enormity of it all drove her to push it away, and what she was going to do if she had the misfortune of running into Dean at work. However, the mouse found herself able to sort and file our myriad problems away. There was just one small, well, that wasn't fair. There was one humongous, no, that's not right either. There was just one moderately large-sized problem. Vince? Yeah, Emma? You're, She stopped, confused, and tried again a few times. Well, you still like guys, right? The rat blinked and chuckled softly. I like guys. And I like you, he answered tactfully, running a paw through her fur. Emma breathed a sigh of relief, slumping against him. Oh, good, it's good. I'm glad. She adjusted herself, feeling slightly, and yet not really uncomfortable, and then realized exactly what she'd been feeling for a while now. Oh God, Vince! Emma, what is it? Did I hurt you? Vince looked at Emma's face and saw her blushing. How many times a day do you paw off? Vince was confused a moment, and then he got it. Oh, Well, Emma, he said, smirking and stroking her cheek, why don't I show you? We hope you enjoyed that story, and hopefully I didn't butcher the reading too much. Do join Toonces and myself next week. We'll be back in session to discuss this episode. We have a nice little treat coming up in the follow-up, too. We're very, very excited to have a set of a few stories by Buck Hopper, and since there are a couple different stories we'll be reading, we're going to have a few different readers reading them. So do stay tuned for that in 2 weeks. Do join us next week to discuss, and we'll see you then. Have a good one.